After 9 years of military service, I was finally coming home for Christmas, but just days before, my wife sent a message saying I wasn't welcome anymore. I simply replied, fine. 5 days later, I woke up to 10 missed calls from my wife and family, and one was from their lawyer. Too late to undo. So there I was, sitting in my cramped studio apartment that smelled like stale coffee and broken dreams, staring at my phone like it had just grown a third eye and started speaking in tongues. 9 years. 9 freaking years I'd been serving Uncle Sam, getting shot at by people who didn't even know my name, eating food that the Geneva Convention probably should have classified as a war crime, and dodging IEDs that had more personality than most of the officers I reported to. 9 years of sleeping on cots that felt like someone had stuffed rocks into a pillowcase and called it a mattress. 9 years of missing birthdays, anniversaries, and every single holiday that normal people take for granted. And for what? To get a text message that read like a bad breakup from someone I'd never even dated. Don't come this Christmas. It's better if you stay away. That's it. No. Hey honey, we need to talk. No, I've been thinking about us. Not even a sorry, but just a cold, calculated emotional eviction notice delivered via text message like I was some Uber Eats driver who'd brought the wrong order. I must have read that message about 15 times, each time hoping the words would magically rearrange themselves into something that made sense, something that didn't feel like getting punched in the gut by someone wearing brass knuckles dipped in disappointment. I looked around my apartment, and I use that term loosely because calling this place an apartment was like calling a cardboard box a mansion. I had a twin bed that squeaked every time I breathed, a microwave that only worked on the nuclear meltdown setting, and a window that overlooked a dumpster where raccoons held what I can only assume were nightly strategy meetings. But you know what I also had? A pathetically optimistic Christmas tree that I'd bought from Walmart 3 days earlier. Yeah, that's right. I'd gone full Norman Rockwell on this thing. It was a cheap artificial tree that probably shed more needles than a real one, decorated with dollar store ornaments that looked like they'd been designed by someone who'd never actually seen Christmas before. I'd even bought one of those sad little tree toppers, a star that leaned to the left like it was drunk. The bags were half-packed. I'd been planning this trip home for months, counting down the days like a prisoner marking time on a cell wall. I had presents wrapped in paper that I'd clearly wrapped myself because it looked like a blind monkey had done it during an earthquake. I'd bought Clara that fancy perfume she'd mentioned once in passing 2 years ago, the one that cost more than my monthly salary. I'd gotten something for her parents, her brother, even their damn dog. I was going to be the perfect soldier coming home for Christmas, the guy in the movies who shows up with snow in his hair and love in his heart, ready to reconnect with the family he'd been protecting from thousands of miles away. Instead, I was standing there in my boxer shorts and an old army t-shirt with a hole under the armpit, holding a phone that had just delivered the emotional equivalent of a drone strike, wondering what the hell I'd done wrong. Had I forgotten an anniversary? Was I supposed to send more care packages in reverse? Did I not like enough of her Instagram posts of her and the girls at brunch spots that cost more than my combat boots? I poured myself 3 fingers of whiskey, the cheap stuff that burns going down and makes you question your life choices, which felt oddly appropriate for the moment. I raised the glass to that stupid, blinking Christmas tree with its judgmental little lights that seemed to mock me with every twinkle. To family, I muttered, and then I downed it in one go because I'm not some fancy whiskey sipper who pretends to taste notes of oak and caramel. It tasted like regret and fire, which was perfect. Then I did something that surprised even me. I picked up my phone, opened that message again, and typed one single word. Fine. Not what do you mean? Not can we talk about this? Not please explain. Just fine. And I meant it. Not the kind of fine that women use when they're definitely not fine and you're about to sleep on the couch for a week. Not the fine that's passive-aggressive code for, we'll discuss this later with witnesses present. The final kind of fine. The period at the end of a sentence that's been going on way too long. The kind of fine that flips a switch inside you from hope to something harder, something that doesn't bend or break or beg for scraps of affection from people who can't even be bothered to pick up the phone and use their actual voice. I hit send and felt something shift in my chest, like a gear clicking into place that had been grinding for years. Then I did what any rational, emotionally devastated soldier would do. I turned off my phone, grabbed the bottle of whiskey, and binge-watched an entire season of a show I'd already seen because my brain needed something mindless to focus on that wasn't the systematic destruction of my marriage via text message. For 5 days, I existed in a weird limbo. I went to the gym and punched a heavy bag until my knuckles bled. I ate cereal for every meal because cooking felt like too much of a commitment to living. I stared at that Christmas tree and debated whether burning it would be cathartic or just get me evicted. I thought about all the times I'd called home and gotten voicemail. All the times I'd sent letters and gotten back 3 sentences that read like they'd been written by someone's assistant. All the holidays I'd spent in the desert, looking at photos on my phone of Clara and her family gathered around a table I wasn't at, smiling in front of a fireplace I'd helped pay for. On day 5, I finally turned my phone back on. Big mistake. Huge. The thing practically exploded with notifications like it was trying to make up for lost time. 10 missed calls. 10. From Clara, from her dad Gerald, from her mom Marion, from her brother Eli, who I'm pretty sure had never voluntarily called me in his entire life, and from someone listed as Grayson Legal Services, which sounded exactly like the kind of fun I needed in my life. There were voicemails, too, ranging from confused to angry to borderline hysterical. Clara's started with, "Logan, what have you done?" Like I was the villain in this story. Gerald's was just heavy breathing and what sounded like someone stress-eating potato chips in the background. Marion's was her crying about family and the holidays, and how could you? Eli's was actually kind of funny. He just said, "Dude, seriously?" and hung up. But it was that call from the lawyer that made me smile. Not a sad smile. Not an ironic smile. A genuine, Christmas morning, opening presents as a kid kind of smile. Because that call meant they'd gotten my letter. The one I'd sent certified mail, return receipt requested, with all the legal authority of someone who'd finally read the fine print on a document he'd signed years ago when he was young and stupid and thought family meant something. I poured myself another whiskey, better stuff this time because I was celebrating, and I raised it to my sad little Christmas tree one more time. "Merry Christmas to me," I said, and I meant that too. Because sometimes the best present you can give yourself is the gift of watching people realize they've made a catastrophic mistake. And watching the Hayes family realize they'd just handed their house to the one person they'd told to stay away, that was better than anything Santa could have fit down a chimney. Too late, folks. Way too late to undo what I'd already set in motion. The wheels were turning, the gears were grinding, and this soldier was about to teach them a lesson about reading contracts before you sign them, and about treating people like they're disposable. I'd survived 9 years of war. Surviving my in-laws. That was going to be the easy part. Look, I need you to understand something before we go any further into this beautiful train wreck of a story. I wasn't always the cynical, whiskey-drinking, legally savvy guy who gets his kicks from serving certified mail to his in-laws. There was a time, and I know this is going to sound crazy, when I actually believed in love, family, and all that Hallmark card nonsense that makes people do stupid things like get married at 20 years old to someone who's completely out of their league. I met Clara Hayes when I was 20 and dumber than a box of rocks. She walked into the auto shop where I was working, driving a BMW that her daddy had bought her for her 19th birthday, complaining about some noise the car was making that turned out to be absolutely nothing, because apparently, luxury cars are supposed to purr like constipated cats. She was gorgeous. I'm talking the kind of beautiful that makes you forget how to form complete sentences and suddenly question whether you've ever actually known how to use deodorant properly. Long dark hair, eyes that could convince you to rob a bank if she asked nicely, and this smile that made you feel like maybe, just maybe, you were worth something. I was a mechanic's son from the wrong side of town, and yes, our town actually had a wrong side, complete with a railroad track that divided the we have money people from the we have character people. My dad ran a small garage that barely kept us afloat, and my mom worked double shifts at the diner just so we could afford the kind of Christmases where you got socks and were grateful for them. I wore thrift store clothes and drove a pickup truck that was older than me, held together by duct tape, prayer, and sheer stubbornness. Clara, on the other hand, came from the Hayes family, and in our town, that name meant something. Her father, Gerald Hayes, owned Hayes Construction Company, which had built half the developments in the county and probably had more money in their checking account than my family had seen in 3 generations. He was one of those guys who wore polo shirts with the collar popped and played golf every weekend at a country club that had a waiting list longer than the line at the DMV. Her mother, Marion, was the kind of woman who organized charity galas and looked at you like you were a science experiment gone wrong if you didn't know which fork to use at dinner. She had that permanent smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, the kind that said, "I'm judging everything about you, but doing it politely." When Clara and I started dating, her parents looked at me the way you'd look at a stray dog that wandered into your yard, like I was something that needed to be dealt with, preferably by someone wearing protective gloves. I wasn't good enough for their daughter, and they made sure I knew it in 1,000 subtle ways. Gerald would make comments about blue-collar work and limited prospects, while shaking my hand so hard it felt like he was trying to break my fingers. Marion would smile and say things like, "How nice that you're so practical," in a tone that made practical sound like a terminal disease. But here's the thing, I actually liked the challenge. I wanted to prove them wrong. I wanted to show them that the poor kid from the bad side of town could be something, could make something of himself, could be worthy of their precious daughter. So when the Army recruiter showed up at my high school during senior year, talking about honor and service and the GI Bill that could pay for college, I saw my ticket out. I saw my chance to become someone these people would respect. Clara cried when I told her I was enlisting. Real tears, not the fake kind she'd later perfect for manipulating her father into buying her things. She held my hands and said, "I'm so proud of you. You're going to be a hero." And like an idiot, I believed her. I believed that she meant it, that she'd wait for me, that distance and time wouldn't change what we had. We got married 3 weeks before I shipped out to basic training. It was a small ceremony. Well, small by Hayes family standards, which meant only 200 people instead of 500. Gerald paid for everything, which should have been my first red flag, because nothing in life is free, especially not weddings paid for by men who look at you like you're an investment they're not sure will pay off. Marion cried during the vows, probably mourning the doctor or lawyer her daughter could have married, instead of some jarhead with more courage than common sense. The first deployment was rough. I was stationed in the Middle East, sleeping in tents that turned into ovens during the day and freezers at night, eating MREs that I'm pretty sure violated several international treaties regarding cruel and unusual punishment. I called home whenever I could, which wasn't often, and Clara always answered with this bright, cheerful voice that made me think everything was fine back home. She'd tell me about her day, about brunch with the girls, about her mom's latest charity event, about her dad's new contract that was going to make them even richer. She posted my deployment photo on Facebook with the caption, "So proud of my brave hubby. Hashtag military wife, hashtag blessed and grateful," with a little American flag emoji and a heart. Her friends commented things like, "You're so strong," and "He's so lucky to have you." I remember feeling this weird mix of pride and embarrassment, like I was being shown off as some kind of accessory to her lifestyle, the military husband to go along with her designer bags and yoga classes. The calls got shorter after the first year. The texts got colder. She'd send me one-word responses to my paragraphs. I'd write her letters, actual handwritten letters because I'm apparently a romantic idiot, and she'd text back, THX, with no punctuation. When I asked if everything was okay, she'd say she was just busy or stressed about wedding planning season, because apparently, her friends were all getting married and she had to attend 17 bridal showers. Every time I came home on leave, which wasn't often, maybe once a year, if I was lucky, things felt different. Clara was different. She'd hug me at the airport, but it felt mechanical, like she was going through the motions for the cameras she imagined were watching. We'd go back to the house, her parents' house, where we were temporarily staying until we could find our own place, which was code for, "We're never leaving because why would we when everything is paid for?" And within an hour, Gerald would find something for me to do. "Logan, while you're home, think you could fix that section of the roof?" "Logan, the gutters need cleaning." "Logan, the lawn's looking a bit rough. Mind giving it a mow?" It was always phrased as a question, but we both knew it wasn't. It was his way of reminding me that I was still the help, still the poor kid who'd married up, still someone who needed to earn his keep. "Keeps you grounded," he'd say with that condescending smile, clapping me on the shoulder like we were buddies. "Can't have you getting soft just because you're wearing a uniform." I did it all. Every single thing they asked. I fixed their roof in 100-degree heat while Gerald watched from the air-conditioned house. I shoveled their driveway during blizzards while Eli sat inside playing video games. I mowed their lawn, trimmed their hedges, repaired their fence, unclogged their drains, and basically served as their unpaid handyman whenever I was stateside. Because that's what you do when you're trying to be part of a family, right? You help out. You contribute. You prove your worth. Spoiler alert, I was proving my worth to people who'd already decided I had none. Between deployments, Clara would send me photos of her and the girls traveling. Miami, Vegas, Cabo. Always smiling, always tan, always holding drinks with little umbrellas in them. Don't worry, she'd text. My parents are helping with expenses. You just focus on staying safe. And I did worry, but not about the money. I worried about the growing distance between us. The way her smile in those photos looked more genuine than any smile she'd given me in years. I told myself it was normal, that military marriages were hard, that the distance was the problem, not us, that when I finally came home for good, everything would go back to how it was in the beginning. I held on to that belief like a lifeline, like it was the only thing keeping me sane while I was dodging bullets and watching friends get shipped home in boxes. I believed in family. I believed in loyalty. I believed that the vows we took actually meant something, that for better or worse, wasn't just pretty words people said in churches before eating expensive cake. I believed that if I just kept my head down, kept serving, kept being the good soldier and the good husband and the good son-in-law, eventually it would all work out. Man, was I wrong. So spectacularly, catastrophically wrong that if they gave out medals for being naive, I'd have enough to weigh down a battleship. Because while I was over there believing in forever, they were back here planning my emotional execution. And the worst part? I handed them the ammunition myself, signed and notarized, years before I even knew there was going to be a war. You know that feeling when you're looking for something completely unrelated and you stumble across something that changes your entire life? Like when you're searching for your car keys and instead find your girlfriend's other phone, or when you're cleaning out the garage and discover your dad's secret comic book collection worth 50 grand. Yeah, that's basically what happened to me. Except instead of something cool, I found a document that would become my nuclear option, my legal ace in the hole, my screw you card that I didn't even know I'd been holding for 8 years. It was about 3 days after I'd sent that beautiful, simple, fine text to Clara. I was sitting in my apartment, surrounded by unpacked bags and that judgmental Christmas tree that I still hadn't bothered to take down because taking it down felt like admitting defeat, and I was in full-blown procrastination mode. I didn't want to think about my crumbling marriage. I didn't want to think about the fact that I'd just spent 9 years defending a country so I could come home to a family that didn't want me. So I did what any rational person does when avoiding their feelings. I started organizing old paperwork. I know. Riveting stuff. But hear me out, because this is where it gets good. I had this old filing box that I'd been dragging around with me through various deployments and temporary housing situations. It was one of those plastic containers you buy at Target, filled with random documents that you know you're supposed to keep but never actually look at. Tax returns, medical records, insurance papers, my enlistment documents, and a bunch of other stuff that seemed important at the time. I was going through it with all the enthusiasm of someone watching paint dry, sorting things into piles of still need, probably need. And why did I keep this receipt from 2015? That's when I found a folder labeled House Cosign 2016 in my own handwriting. I stared at it for a solid minute, my brain trying to retrieve a memory that had been buried under years of sand, sweat, and selective amnesia. 2016, I would have been, 23? Fresh off my first deployment, still young and stupid, and eager to please my in-laws who barely tolerated my existence. I opened the folder, and suddenly it all came flooding back like a bad movie flashback sequence. It had been summer, brutally hot, and I was home on leave. Clara and I had been married for about 3 years at that point, still living with her parents because saving for our own place apparently meant Clara saving for handbags while I sent most of my paycheck home. Gerald had called me into his study, and yes, the man had an actual study with leather chairs and a mahogany desk, and probably a secret compartment where he kept his soul, and he'd sat me down with this serious expression that made me think someone had died. "Logan," he'd said, pouring himself a scotch that cost more than my monthly salary, not offering me any because I guess enlisted men don't deserve top-shelf liquor. "I need to talk to you about something important. Man to man. Man to man." That should have been my first clue that I was about to get screwed, because in my experience, Nothing good ever follows those 3 words. It's like when someone says, "We need to talk," or "I'm not mad, but," or "It's not you, it's me." Red flags everywhere, and I was colorblind. He went on to explain that he was refinancing the house. Something about better interest rates and market conditions, and a bunch of financial jargon that I didn't understand, because I was 23 and my idea of financial planning was making sure I had enough money for pizza on weekends. He said the bank was being difficult about the loan, something about debt-to-income ratios and his business having a temporary cash flow situation. The thing is, Gerald had said, swirling his fancy scotch like he was in a whiskey commercial, banks love military members. Something about your reliability, your steady income, your service to the country. He'd smiled at me then, the kind of smile a shark gives a seal before lunch. They'd approve this loan in a heartbeat if someone like you was on it. "You want me to co-sign your mortgage?" I'd asked, because even young and stupid me could connect those dots. "Think of it as helping family." Marion had chimed in from the doorway, appearing like she'd been waiting for her cue. She'd walked over and patted my shoulder in that way that made me feel like a golden retriever who'd just learned a new trick. "You're part of this family now, Logan. This is what families do. They help each other." Gerald had slid the papers across his expensive desk. "It's just a formality, really. You probably won't even be on the deed long term. Once my business picks back up and we refinance again in a few years, we'll take your name right off. You won't have to worry about a thing." I should have read those papers. I should have taken them to a lawyer. I should have called my dad, who despite being a simple mechanic had more common sense in his pinky finger than I had in my entire body. But I didn't do any of those things. Instead, I did what I always did when it came to the Hayes family. I tried to prove I was worthy. I tried to show them I was a team player, a family man, someone who could be trusted. Plus, Clara had come in right as I was hesitating, wrapped her arms around me from behind, and whispered, "Thank you for helping us, baby. This means so much to my parents." And just like that, any rational thought I might have had evaporated like water on a Phoenix sidewalk. I signed. Multiple pages, multiple places, initialing here and there like I was signing autographs. Gerald had made a big show of it, bringing out some expensive pen that probably cost more than my car, having Marion witness the signatures, even popping open champagne afterward like we were celebrating something other than me potentially ruining my financial future. "Welcome to the family business," Gerald had said, raising his glass. At the time, I thought he meant I was finally being accepted. Looking back, I realized he meant I was finally useful. Now, sitting in my sad apartment 8 years later, I read through that document like it was the Dead Sea Scrolls, and I was an archaeologist who'd just made the discovery of the century. I read it once, then twice, then a third time, because surely I was misunderstanding something. But nope, the words didn't change no matter how many times I read them. According to the legal document I was holding, the one with my signature next to Gerald's, notarized and official and binding as hell, I wasn't just a co-signer. I was a co-owner, and not just any co-owner. Due to some quirk in how the loan had been structured, probably because Gerald had been trying to game the system to get better terms with my military status, I owned 51% of the property at 45 Auburn Lane. 51%. That's not half. That's not equal. That's controlling interest. That's majority ownership. That's the legal equivalent of being the captain of a ship, while everyone else is just crew members who can be voted off at any time. I sat there holding this document, my hands actually shaking, and I started laughing. Not a little chuckle. A full-blown, probably concerning the neighbors, borderline hysterical laugh that went on for a solid 5 minutes. Because the irony was just too perfect. Too absolutely, beautifully perfect. For 9 years, I'd been deployed overseas, sleeping in tents and temporary barracks, eating food that I wouldn't feed to my worst enemy, getting shot at by people who hated me for reasons I didn't fully understand. 9 years of danger and discomfort and sacrifice. And the whole time, the Hayes family had been living in a house that I technically owned the majority of. They'd been sipping cocoa by a fireplace that was legally more mine than theirs. They'd been hosting their fancy dinner parties and Christmas gatherings in a living room that I had controlling interest in. They'd been sleeping peacefully in bedrooms that existed on property I could legally make decisions about. And now, after all that, after 9 years of me being the good soldier and the good son-in-law and the good little doormat they could wipe their expensive shoes on, They'd sent me a text telling me not to come home to the house I owned 51% of. They'd emotionally evicted me from my own property. I looked at that document like it was a winning lottery ticket, which in a way, it was. I thought about all the times Gerald had made me fix his roof, clean his gutters, mow his lawn. All the times Marion had looked at me like I was something she'd scraped off her shoe. All the times Clara had prioritized literally everything else over our marriage. All the times Eli had smirked at me like I was the help. They'd been living in my house, drinking cocoa in my living room, celebrating holidays I wasn't invited to on property I legally controlled. For the first time in days, hell, for the first time in years, I smiled. Not a sad smile, not a bitter smile. A genuine, ear-to-ear, Christmas morning when you were 6 kind of smile. The kind of smile that probably would have scared small children if any had been around to see it. Oh, this is going to be fun, I said out loud to my empty apartment, to my sad Christmas tree, to whatever God or karma or universal justice was listening. This is going to be so much fun. I spent the rest of that day reading and rereading the cosign document like it was the final page of a mystery novel where the butler actually did it. I Googled terms like controlling interest and majority ownership, and can you legally kick people out of a house you technically own, which probably put me on some kind of watch list, but at that point, I didn't care. The internet became my best friend, my law school, my vindication station. Every article I read, every legal forum I scrolled through, every real estate law website I visited confirmed what I already suspected. I had options. Beautiful, legally binding, totally going to ruin Christmas options. But here's the thing about the internet. It's great for general information and cat videos, but terrible for specific legal advice. Every website ends with that annoying disclaimer. This is not legal advice. Consult with a qualified attorney in your jurisdiction, which is basically lawyer speak for, we're not getting sued if you screw this up, buddy. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I called Rick Stanton. Rick and I went way back. We'd served together during my second deployment, bunking in the same tent that smelled like feet, regret, and industrial-strength disinfectant that somehow made everything smell worse. He was one of those guys who joined the Army to pay for law school, spent his downtime reading legal textbooks while the rest of us were watching pirated movies on someone's laptop, and generally seemed too smart to be shooting at people in the desert. After his service ended, he'd gone back stateside, finished his law degree, and set up shop as a real estate attorney in Colorado. We'd kept in touch over the years, mostly texting about sports and occasionally calling each other when we needed to remember that there were people who understood what it was like to live in a place where the temperature could literally kill you, and people actually tried to make that happen. I looked at my phone. It was 8 p.m. on a Tuesday, which meant Rick was probably either working late because lawyers apparently don't have normal human schedules, or he was at home watching whatever pretentious documentary lawyers watch to feel intellectual. Either way, this couldn't wait. My newfound legal revelation was burning a hole in my brain like acid, and I needed professional confirmation that I wasn't losing my mind. The phone rang 3 times before he picked up. Logan Hayes, as I live and breathe. Rick's voice came through, sounding genuinely happy to hear from me, which was more than I could say for literally anyone else in my life at the moment. To what do I owe the pleasure? Wait, let me guess. You're calling to ask me what habeas corpus means because you're watching Law and Order reruns again. Hypothetically, I said, cutting straight to the chase because small talk felt like a waste of time when I was sitting on a legal gold mine. What happens if a guy owns 51% of a house and the other people living in it, who own the other 49%, send him a text message telling him he's not welcome there anymore? There was a pause on the other end. A long pause. The kind of pause that lawyers do when they're processing information and calculating billable hours in their heads. Then Rick started laughing. Not a polite chuckle. A full, genuine, wheezing laugh that sounded like he might actually hurt himself. Oh man, he gasped between laughs. Please tell me this isn't hypothetical. Please tell me this is your actual life right now because this is the best thing I've heard all week. It's theoretically based on real events that may or may not be happening to someone who may or may not be me, I said, trying to maintain some dignity even though we both knew exactly what I was talking about. Logan, Rick said, his voice shifting into what I assumed was his professional attorney mode, though he was still clearly amused. If someone owns 51% of a property, they have controlling interest. That means they can make major decisions about that property. If the minority owners, that's your in-laws, hypothetically speaking, are telling the majority owner he can't access his own property, they're essentially in breach of, well, everything. Property law, common sense, basic human decency. So hypothetically, I continued, enjoying this game way too much. If the majority owner wanted to, I don't know, exercise his legal rights and maybe remind the minority owners who actually has the power in this situation, he could do that. Hypothetically, Rick said, and I could hear the grin in his voice. That majority owner would have every legal right to assert his ownership interest. He could demand access. He could initiate proceedings to buy out the minority owners. Hell, depending on how the mortgage is structured and whether they're current on payments, he could even force a sale of the property. I felt a warm glow spreading through my chest, the kind of feeling you get when you realize that karma isn't just a concept. It's an actual force of nature, and it's currently on your side. And hypothetically, if this guy wanted to, say, send a formal letter asserting his rights, would that be advisable? Certified mail, Rick said immediately. Return receipt requested. Make it official, make it legal, make it impossible for them to claim they didn't receive it. You want a paper trail that could be seen from space. Hypothetically, of course, I added. Of course, Rick agreed. Logan, level with me for a second. Is this actually happening? Did Clara and her family really tell you not to come home? I sighed, dropping the hypothetical game because pretending was exhausting and Rick was probably one of the only people in my life who wouldn't judge me for the mess I was in. Via text message. After 9 years of service. Don't come this Christmas. It's better if you stay away. That's literally all she said. Jesus Christ, Rick muttered. And you co-signed their mortgage? 8 years ago, Gerald convinced me it was just a formality, that it would help them get better rates, that they'd refinance and take my name off eventually. Young and stupid me signed without really reading the fine print. And the fine print says you own 51%, Rick said, not as a question but as a statement, because he was already putting the pieces together like the smart lawyer he was. Bingo, I confirmed. Logan, Rick said slowly, carefully, like he was savoring every word. They just made the biggest mistake of their lives. You know that, right? They literally handed you the power to upend their entire existence, and then they pissed you off. That's like giving someone a loaded gun and then insulting their mother. So what would you advise, counselor? I asked, feeling more alive than I had in months. Hypothetically speaking, if someone wanted to, I don't know, teach a family a lesson about treating people like disposable trash, what would be the most legal, most effective, most satisfying way to do that? Rick was quiet for a moment, and I could practically hear the wheels turning in his lawyer brain. Okay, here's what we're going to do. And I say we, because there's no way in hell I'm missing out on being part of this. First, we need to verify the exact terms of your ownership. I'll need you to send me a copy of that document. High-resolution photos will work for now. Second, we need to check if they're current on mortgage payments, property taxes, all that fun stuff. Third, we draft a formal letter asserting your rights as majority owner and giving them notice that you intend to exercise those rights. What kind of notice are we talking? I asked, pulling out a notebook because this was starting to feel real, and I needed to write this down before my adrenaline-soaked brain forgot something important. We inform them that as majority owner, you're asserting your right to access the property. We give them a time frame to respond. Let's say 30 days because we're not monsters, even though they kind of are. We make it clear that you're prepared to take further legal action if necessary, which could include forcing a sale, buying them out, or any number of other options that will make them very uncomfortable. I like where this is going, I said, grinning at my sad Christmas tree like it was suddenly the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. The best part, Rick continued, clearly enjoying himself now, is that this is all completely legal. You're not being vindictive. You're exercising your property rights. You're not being cruel. You're asserting legal ownership. They can't claim harassment or anything like that because you're literally doing what any property owner would do when denied access to their own asset. When can we start? I asked, already pulling up my email to send him photos of the document. How about right now? Rick said, send me those photos. I'll review everything tonight, draft a preliminary letter, and we can finalize it tomorrow. Oh, and Logan, this is going to cost them way more than it's going to cost you. Consider my services a Christmas gift from one veteran to another. I'm just happy to be part of what is shaping up to be the most satisfying property dispute of my entire career. We talked for another hour, going over details, discussing strategy, occasionally laughing at the absurdity of the situation. Rick explained the legal terminology, what rights I had, what options they had, which weren't many, and what the most likely outcomes would be. Every scenario ended with me in a position of power and them scrambling to figure out how they'd screwed themselves so spectacularly. By the time we hung up, I had a plan. A real, legal, bulletproof plan that would make the Hayes family wish they'd never sent that text message. I poured myself a celebratory drink, the good stuff this time, not the cheap whiskey that tasted like regret, and raised it to my phone. "Thanks, Rick," I said out loud, even though he couldn't hear me anymore. "You just turned my worst Christmas into my best revenge." Then I sat down and started writing the letter that would change everything. It was going to be polite, professional, and absolutely devastating. The kind of letter that would arrive in their mailbox like a grenade with a bow on it. "Merry Christmas, Hayes family. Merry freaking Christmas." So here's what I did after Rick and I hung up. I took his advice and went completely off the grid. Not in a move to a cabin in Montana and started hoarding canned goods kind of way, but in a turned off my phone and pretended the rest of the world didn't exist kind of way. Rick had sent me the draft letter within 24 hours, because apparently lawyers work faster when they're enjoying themselves, and it was a masterpiece. Professional, legally airtight, and just passive-aggressive enough to make me giggle like a schoolgirl every time I read it. The letter was basically the legal equivalent of a mic drop. It informed Gerald and Marion Hayes that I, Logan Hayes, was exercising my rights as the majority owner of the property located at 45 Auburn Lane. It politely, and by politely, I mean in that way that lawyers have of saying screw you, using words like forthwith and hereby, stated that I would be asserting my controlling interest in the property effective immediately. It mentioned something about requiring access to assess the condition of my asset, which was lawyer speak for, "I'm coming over whether you like it or not." It gave them 30 days to contact my legal representation, that's Rick, to discuss options moving forward, which could include buyout negotiations, sale of the property, or other remedies available under the law. The best part? Rick had added this beautiful sentence at the end. "Please note that any attempt to deny the majority owner access to the property may result in legal action including, but not limited to, claims of conversion, trespass, and breach of fiduciary duty." I didn't know what half of those terms meant, but they sounded expensive and scary, which was exactly the vibe we were going for. We sent it certified mail, return receipt. Requested to arrive right after New Year's. The timing was deliberate. Let them have their Christmas in peace, thinking they'd successfully gotten rid of me, and then hit them with reality when they were nursing their holiday hangovers and feeling smug about how they'd handled the Logan situation. In the meantime, I decided to actually enjoy myself for once. I booked a cabin in the Rockies, one of those places with a fireplace, a hot tub, and absolutely no cell service unless you walked half a mile up a hill, which I had no intention of doing. I packed my bags, grabbed a stack of books I'd been meaning to read for 5 years, bought enough bourbon to stock a small bar, and drove my ass up to the mountains where the air was clean and nobody knew my name or my problems. For 5 days, I lived like a hermit king. I woke up when I felt like it, which was usually around noon because apparently 9 years of military wake-up calls had left me with a serious sleep deficit that needed addressing. I cooked elaborate breakfasts. We're talking pancakes, bacon, eggs, the whole 9 yards, just because I could. I sat in that hot tub under the stars, drinking whiskey and feeling like I'd finally figured out what peace actually meant. I watched terrible movies on Netflix. I read 3 entire books. I didn't shave, didn't check email, didn't think about Clara or her family or that stupid text message that had started this whole beautiful disaster. It was the best Christmas I'd had in 9 years. On December 30th, I figured I should probably check back in with civilization, if only to make sure World War III hadn't started without me. I walked up that hill to the spot where my phone got 1 bar of service, turned it on, and watched as it exploded with notifications like a digital fireworks show. 10 missed calls, 15 voicemails, 23 text messages, multiple emails. My phone was having a nervous breakdown, trying to catch up with all the chaos I'd apparently missed. I scrolled through the call log first. Clara had called 4 times. Gerald had called twice, which was notable because the man had never voluntarily called me in his entire life. I'm pretty sure he had Marion or his secretary dial for him, like some kind of 1950s executive. Marion had called once, which was shocking because I don't think she actually knew my phone number existed. Eli, Clara's brother, the walking trust fund with a personality disorder, had called twice, which meant this was serious because Eli's usual communication strategy was ignoring my existence unless he needed something heavy lifted. But the really interesting call was from Grayson Legal Services. That was Gerald's lawyer, a guy named Martin Grayson who I'd met exactly once at a family function where he'd looked at me like I was a stain on the furniture. The fact that their lawyer was calling me meant they'd gotten the letter. And more importantly, it meant they'd read it. I started with the voicemails, because I'm a sucker for drama and I wanted to hear the progression of panic in real time. Eli's first message was actually kind of funny. Dude, what the hell? Call me back. Like, seriously, call me back. That was it. Short, confused, mildly panicked. Eli never had been good with complex emotions or complete sentences. Clara's first message was a masterclass in passive-aggressive confusion. Logan, I don't understand what's happening. My parents got some kind of letter from a lawyer? Your lawyer? I thought we were handling this like adults. Can you please call me so we can talk about this rationally? Oh, the irony. She wanted to talk rationally. The woman who dumped me via text message wanted to discuss rationality. That was rich enough to pay off the national debt. Gerald's message was just heavy breathing and what sounded like someone crumpling paper in the background. Then he said, "You son of a," and the message cut off. I assumed Marion had grabbed the phone from him before he said something that could be used against him in court. Clara's second message was less composed. Logan, seriously, this isn't funny anymore. Whatever you think you're doing, you need to stop. My dad is really upset, and my mom is... Look, just call me back, okay? We can fix this. We can work this out. Work it out. Like this was a scheduling conflict or a misunderstanding about dinner plans. Not, them telling me not to come home to a house I legally own the majority of. Marion's message was peak Marion. Her voice was shaking, actually shaking, as she said, Logan, dear, I think there's been some kind of terrible mistake. Some confusion with paperwork from years ago. Please call us so we can clear this up. I'm sure it's just a simple misunderstanding. We're family, after all. Family works these things out together. Family. That word again. Funny how I was suddenly family again now that they needed something from me. Eli's second message was less chill. Bro, I don't know what your game is, but you need to knock it off. You're stressing everyone out, and it's Christmas. Have some freaking respect. Whatever beef you have with Clara, leave my parents out of it. Leave his parents out of it. His parents who'd spent 8 years living in a house I technically owned while treating me like the help. Those parents. Clara's third message was where things got interesting. She was crying, or doing a really good impression of crying. It was hard to tell with Clara. Please, Logan. I know I hurt you. I know the text was wrong. I should have called, should have talked to you in person. But this is too much. You're going to make my parents lose their house. Where are they going to go? What are they supposed to do? Please, please call me back. We can figure this out. I'll do anything. Anything. Another interesting word choice. Like this was a negotiation and she had something I wanted. Spoiler alert, she didn't. Gerald's second message was actually coherent this time. Probably because Marion was standing next to him, making sure he didn't say something actionable. Logan, this is Gerald. I think we need to sit down and discuss this situation like men. Obviously, there's been some miscommunication, and I'm sure we can reach an understanding that works for everyone. Call my lawyer, Martin Grayson, and he rattled off a number like I was actually going to call his lawyer to negotiate my own property rights. Clara's fourth message was back to angry. You know what? Fine. If this is how you want to play it, fine. But you're going to regret this, Logan. You think you can just waltz in and destroy my family? After everything we've done for you? After my parents took you in, helped you, treated you like a son? This is how you repay them? You're not the man I married. You're not the man I thought you were. There it was. The real Clara. The one who came out when she didn't get her way. The one who rewrote history to make herself the victim and everyone else the villain. According to her version of events, her parents had taken me in like I was some kind of charity case, not the guy who'd co-signed their mortgage and spent every leave fixing their house while they sipped lemonade. The voicemail from Martin Grayson, attorney at law, was exactly what you'd expect. Professional, slightly condescending, full of phrases like "my clients" and "amicable resolution" and "avoid unnecessary litigation." He wanted me to call him to discuss options and explore mutually beneficial solutions. Translation: they wanted to make this go away without admitting they'd screwed up. I stood there on that hill, cold wind whipping around me, staring at my phone like it was a window into an alternate universe where the Hayes family was actually capable of self-reflection. Then I did something that felt absolutely perfect in the moment. I called Rick. "They got the letter," I said when he answered. "Oh, I know," Rick said, and I could hear the grin in his voice. "Martin Grayson called me yesterday. Had a very interesting conversation about your unreasonable demands and how we should all work together to resolve this unfortunate situation. I told him my client was simply exercising his legal property rights and that any further communication should go through my office." What did he say to that? He sputtered a lot, used words like disproportionate and vindictive. I reminded him that property law doesn't care about feelings, only ownership percentages. Then he threatened to countersue for, honestly, I'm not sure what. He was throwing legal terms around like confetti, hoping something would stick. Can he do that? Countersue? For what? Rick laughed. For you owning your own property? For asserting rights that are clearly documented and legally binding? He can try, but he'd get laughed out of court so fast he'd get whiplash. No, Logan, they don't have a leg to stand on here. They know it. Their lawyer knows it. And now they're panicking because they've realized they can't bully or guilt-trip their way out of this one. I smiled at the mountains, at the clean snow and the clear sky and the absolute perfection of this moment. So what happens now? Now? Now you decide what you actually want out of this. Do you want them out of the house? Do you want to buy them out? Do you want to force a sale and split the proceeds? Do you want to just make them sweat for a while? You're in the driver's seat here, my friend. They're just along for the ride. I thought about it for a moment, really thought about it. What did I want? Revenge? Sure, a little. Justice? Absolutely. But more than anything, I wanted them to understand that actions have consequences. That you can't treat people like disposable trash and expect them to just disappear when it's convenient. Let them stew for a bit, I finally said. Don't respond to Grayson yet. Let them spend New Year's wondering what's coming next. Rick laughed, long and loud. You evil genius. I love it. I'll keep my phone handy for when they inevitably call back in a panic. We hung up, and I turned my phone back off. Whatever happened next could wait until after the new year. For now, I had a hot tub, bourbon, and the sweet, sweet satisfaction of knowing that somewhere in that fancy house on Auburn Lane, the Hayes family was having the worst holiday season of their lives. Merry Christmas to me, indeed. I made it back to my apartment on January 1st, nursing a mild hangover from celebrating the new year alone in a mountain cabin with a bottle of scotch that cost more than it should have, but felt worth every penny. The drive down from the Rockies had been peaceful. Just me, the radio playing classic rock, and the kind of clarity you only get when you've spent 5 days completely disconnected from the chaos of your life. I felt recharged, focused, and ready to face whatever fresh hell the Hayes family was about to throw at me. I should have known the universe wouldn't let me enjoy that feeling for long. My phone, which I'd reluctantly turned back on when I hit civilization, started buzzing before I even got my key in the apartment door. Clara. Of course it was Clara. The woman had a sixth sense for knowing exactly when I'd made myself available for her particular brand of emotional manipulation. I stared at the screen for a solid 10 seconds, debating whether to answer or let it go to voicemail for the 11th time. But curiosity, and maybe a tiny bit of that old muscle memory that still responded to my wife's name on my phone, made me answer. "Hello, Clara," I said, keeping my voice neutral, like I was answering a call from my dentist's office reminding me about a cleaning appointment. "Logan." Her voice was soft, trembling, wrapped in that vulnerability she could turn on and off like a light switch. "Thank God. I've been so worried. Where have you been? I've been calling, and you just disappeared, and I thought maybe something had happened to you, and I was on vacation," I interrupted, because I wasn't going to let her build up steam with the worried wife routine. "Cell service in the mountains is spotty. What do you want, Clara?" There was a pause, and I could practically hear her recalibrating, switching strategies. That's kind of cold, Logan. I'm your wife." I was genuinely concerned. "You're right. You are my wife," I said, dropping my keys on the counter and pouring myself a glass of water because this conversation was going to require hydration. The same wife who texted me, "Don't come home," after 9 years of me serving overseas. So forgive me if I'm not exactly overflowing with warmth right now. Another pause. Longer this time. When she spoke again, the trembling in her voice had increased. I know that was wrong. I've been thinking about it constantly, Logan. I haven't slept. I've been sick about it. That text, it wasn't me. It was my dad. He was upset about something, and he was in my ear, and I wasn't thinking clearly. There it was. Blame Gerald. Classic Clara move. Take any mistake she'd made and find a way to make it someone else's fault. Never mind that she was the one who'd typed the message. Never mind that she was the one who'd hit send. No, it was her daddy's fault for being in her ear. Your dad doesn't control your thumbs, Clara, I said, sitting down on my couch that had definitely seen better days. You wrote that message. You sent it. You made a choice. Own it. You're right, she said quickly, too quickly, like she'd been coached. You're absolutely right. I take full responsibility. It was my choice, and it was the wrong choice. I hurt you, and I'm so sorry. I should have called. I should have talked to you like an adult instead of hiding behind a text message. I was a coward, and I hate myself for it. The apology sounded rehearsed, like she'd practiced it in front of a mirror, or maybe run it past her mom first to make sure it hit all the right notes. But even if it was genuine, which I seriously doubted, it was way too little, way too late. You don't get to unring a bell just because you suddenly realize the sound was unpleasant. Okay, I said simply. Okay. She sounded confused, like she'd expected more of a reaction. That's it. Just okay. What do you want me to say, Clara? That I accept your apology and everything's fine now? That we can just pretend the last 9 years didn't happen? That you didn't slowly check out of our marriage while I was getting shot at in the desert? That your family didn't treat me like the hired help every single time I came home on leave? That's not fair, she said, and now there was an edge to her voice, a hint of the real Clara peeking through the vulnerable act. My family welcomed you. They let us live with them rent-free. My dad gave you work to do to keep you busy. They tried to include you. I actually laughed at that. Couldn't help it. Welcome me? Clara, your dad made me fix his roof in 100-degree heat while he watched from the air-conditioned house. Your mom looked at me like I was something she'd scraped off her shoe. Your brother acted like I was invisible unless he needed someone to move furniture. That's not welcoming. That's having a live-in handyman you don't have to pay. That's not how it was, she protested, but her voice lacked conviction. She knew exactly how it was. She'd just chosen to ignore it because it was easier than standing up to her family. Whatever, I said, suddenly tired of this conversation. Was there something specific you wanted, or did you just call to practice your apology speech? She was quiet for a moment, and I could hear her breathing, could imagine her sitting in that fancy house, my house, technically, trying to figure out her next move. When she spoke again, all pretense of vulnerability was gone. This was Clara in negotiation mode. Clara trying to make a deal. Please don't do this, she said. Don't take the house from my parents. They don't deserve this. They're not young anymore, Logan. Where are they going to go? What are they supposed to do? I don't know, Clara. Maybe they could do what millions of other people do and find a place to live that they can actually afford. Novel concept, I know. You're being cruel, she said, and now the tears were back in her voice. Real ones this time, I thought, though with Clara it was always hard to tell. This isn't you. The man I married wouldn't do something like this. He had compassion. He had a heart. The man you married died somewhere between your 100th ignored phone call and that text message, I said flatly. What you're talking to now is what's left. And what's left is someone who's done being a doormat for your family. Logan, please. Now she was full-on crying, those big sobbing sounds that used to make me want to fix whatever was wrong, to make her stop hurting. Funny how 9 years and one devastating text message can completely rewire your emotional responses. I'm begging you. If you ever loved me, if any part of you still cares about me, please don't do this. We can work this out. We can fix our marriage. We can start over. But not if you destroy my family first. Start over. I repeated, genuinely incredulous. Clara, you told me not to come home. You emotionally evicted me from my own marriage. And now you want to start over because it turns out I have leverage you didn't know about? That's not starting over. That's you trying to manipulate me into giving up the one thing that might actually make your family treat me like a human being. That's not what this is, she insisted, but we both knew she was lying. I miss you. I want us to work. I want to fix what's broken between us. But I can't do that if you're attacking my family. I'm not attacking anyone, I said, feeling my patience evaporate like water on hot asphalt. I'm exercising my legal rights as the owner of property that your father convinced me to co-sign 8 years ago. Remember that? When he said it was just a formality. When he said it would help them out. When he promised they'd refinance and take my name off. Funny how none of that ever happened, isn't it? He was going to, Clara said weakly. The business had some setbacks, and the timing was never right, and he was perfectly happy to let me stay on the hook while he collected rental income from college kids living in 2 of the bedrooms. I interrupted. Yeah, Clara, I know about that. You think I didn't do my homework? You think I just jumped into this without understanding exactly what your family has been doing while I was overseas? She gasped. Genuine shock in that sound. How did you? Because unlike your family, I actually read documents before I make decisions, I said. I had the property inspected. I know everything, Clara. Every lease, every payment, every dollar your parents have collected on property, I own the majority of. And you know what really kills me? They were making money off my house and still told me I wasn't welcome there for Christmas. The line went quiet. I could hear her breathing, ragged and uneven. Could almost see her in my mind sitting on that expensive couch in that expensive living room in that house that was more mine than hers, realizing that this wasn't just about hurt feelings or wounded pride. This was about actual, legal, financially devastating consequences for her family. What do you want? She finally asked, her voice small and defeated. Money? Is that what this is about? Because we can work something out. My dad can pay you for your share. We can make this go away. This isn't about money, I said, though the idea of Gerald having to cut me a check was admittedly appealing. This is about respect. About being treated like a person instead of a tool. About not being thrown away the second I become inconvenient. Then what? She asked, frustration creeping back into her voice. What do you want from us, Logan? Tell me what you want, and I'll make it happen. I thought about it for a moment. What did I want? An apology that meant something? An acknowledgement that they'd treated me like garbage? Some cosmic justice that would make the last 9 years feel worth it? I want you to understand that actions have consequences, I finally said. I want your family to realize that you can't treat people like they're disposable. I want your father to know what it feels like to lose something important because someone else decided he wasn't worth keeping around. You're being vindictive, she said quietly. Maybe, I admitted. Or maybe I'm just tired of being nice to people who see niceness as weakness. Maybe I'm done being the good soldier who follows orders even when those orders are designed to keep him in his place. Clara was crying again, harder this time. Please, Logan. You're better than this. I know you are. The man I fell in love with wouldn't use his power to hurt people. The man you fell in love with doesn't exist anymore, I said, and I realized as I said it that it was true. That version of me. Young, optimistic, eager to please, desperate to be accepted by a family that would never actually accept him, had died somewhere between the desert heat and the cold reality of that text message. He got left behind somewhere in the sand. What came back is someone who actually values himself. So that's it? She asked, her voice breaking. You're just going to destroy everything? Our marriage? My family? All of it? I'm not destroying anything, Clara, I said, suddenly exhausted by this entire conversation. I'm just refusing to be destroyed anymore. There's a difference. Your family will figure something out. Rich people always do. They'll sell the house, downsize, maybe rent for a while. They'll survive. The question is whether they'll learn anything from it. And us? She whispered. What about us? I looked around my sad little apartment, at the Christmas tree I still hadn't taken down, at the life I'd built alone while she was off living hers without me. There is no us, Clara. There hasn't been for a long time. We've just been pretending there was. The line went dead. She hung up without saying goodbye, which felt appropriate. We've been saying goodbye in small ways for years. Might as well make it official. I set my phone down and poured myself that bourbon I'd been craving since the call started. Here's to honesty, I thought, raising my glass to the empty room. And to finally being done with people who think love means tolerating their cruelty. 2 days after Clara's tearful phone call, which had accomplished exactly nothing except confirming that our marriage was deader than disco. Rick called me with news that made me spit out my morning coffee all over my kitchen counter. "You're not going to believe what Layla found," he said, and I could hear that barely contained glee in his voice that lawyers get when they discover something juicy during discovery. Layla was his assistant, a sharp-as-hell paralegal who apparently had investigative skills that would make the FBI jealous. "Try me," I said, grabbing paper towels to clean up my coffee disaster. At this point, nothing about the Hayes family would surprise me. They could be running a meth lab out of the basement, and I'd just shrug. "Close," Rick said. "They're running an illegal boarding house." I stopped mid-wipe. "Come again." "The property inspection Layla did? She found evidence that Gerald and Marion have been renting out 2 of the bedrooms to college kids. Cash only, no lease agreements, no permits, completely under the table. They've basically turned your house into an unauthorized Airbnb meets Flophouse situation." I stood there in my kitchen, paper towel dripping coffee onto my floor, trying to process this information. "You're telling me that Gerald Hayes, Mr. I own a construction company and know all about building codes and regulations, has been illegally subletting rooms in a house he doesn't even fully own?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you," Rick confirmed. "And it gets better. According to the neighbors Layla interviewed, very chatty folks, by the way, they love to gossip. This has been going on for at least 3 years. Maybe longer. These kids rotate in and out, usually college students from the university about 20 minutes away. Gerald charges them $500 a month each, cash, no receipts, no paper trail. That's $1,000 a month in unreported income that you, as the majority owner, never consented to and never saw a dime of." I started laughing. I couldn't help it. The absurdity of it was just too perfect, too beautifully ironic. Here I'd been, sleeping in tents in the Middle East, eating meals that violated several articles of the Geneva Convention, dodging bullets and IEDs, while Gerald and Marion were back home collecting tax-free rental income from college kids living in bedrooms of a house that was legally more mine than theirs. They were making money off my property, and then had the audacity to tell me I wasn't welcome there for Christmas. "Logan, you still there?" Rick asked after I'd been laughing for what was probably an uncomfortable amount of time. Yeah, I'm here," I managed between gasps. This is incredible. This is the most Gerald Hayes thing I've ever heard. The man lectures me about responsibility and being a man and contributing to society. And meanwhile, he's running an illegal rental operation and pocketing cash under the table. The hypocrisy is so thick you could cut it with a knife and serve it at Thanksgiving. "It's definitely actionable," Rick said, his lawyer brain already working through the implications. "This gives us additional leverage. Not only are you the majority owner exercising your rights, but you're also shutting down an illegal operation that violates local housing ordinances, zoning laws, and probably several tax regulations. You're not being vindictive. You're being a responsible property owner who's putting a stop to illegal activity." "How illegal are we talking?" I asked, my mind already spinning with possibilities. "Well, let's see," Rick said, and I could hear him shuffling papers. "Operating a boarding house without proper permits and licenses. That's violation number 1. Failure to collect and remit occupancy taxes. Violation number 2. Unreported rental income. That's a federal tax issue. Violation number 3. Potential violations of local zoning ordinances if the property is zoned for single-family residential only." And Layla checked. "It is. That's violation number 4. And if there are any housing code violations in those bedrooms, which there almost certainly are because I doubt Gerald was maintaining them to code, that's additional violations. Your in-laws have basically built themselves a house of cards, and you're holding the match." I sat down at my kitchen table, my coffee forgotten, my brain trying to wrap itself around the magnificent stupidity of what Gerald had done. "So what you're saying is that not only do I have the legal right to exercise my ownership of the property, but I also have the moral high ground of shutting down an illegal operation?" "Bingo," Rick said. "And here's the really beautiful part. When we inform them that all subleases are void and they need to vacate those tenants immediately, they can't argue. They can't say, 'But we have lease agreements,' because those agreements are illegal. They can't say these kids have nowhere to go because they should never have been there in the first place. They have absolutely no leg to stand on. They're caught red-handed running an illegal boarding house in a property they don't have controlling interest in. How much do you think they've made off this over the years? I asked, doing some quick mental math that was probably way off, but made me angry anyway. If it's been 3 years at $1,000 a month, that's $36,000 minimum, Rick calculated. But Layla's talking to more neighbors, checking county records, looking at utility bills. If it's been longer, and I suspect it has, we could be talking $50, $60, even $75,000. All cash, all unreported, all from a property you own the majority of. I felt something hot and sharp twist in my chest. Not quite anger. I was past that now, but something closer to cold, calculated fury. The kind of emotion that doesn't make you yell or throw things, but instead makes you very, very focused on the task at hand. Gerald Hayes had spent years looking down his nose at me, treating me like I was beneath him, like I was some poor kid who'd gotten lucky marrying his daughter. He'd made me fix his roof, clean his gutters, mow his lawn, all while secretly profiting off a property I owned the majority of. He'd been living off my financial reliability with the bank, while simultaneously treating me like I was worthless. Draft another letter, I said, my voice probably colder than Rick had ever heard it. Effective immediately, all subleases are void. Any tenants currently residing in the property have 7 days to vacate. The property is under new management, and unauthorized occupants will be considered trespassers subject to legal action. 7 days is pretty aggressive, Rick said, but he didn't sound like he was objecting, more like he was admiring the strategy. You sure you want to go that hard? They told me not to come home to a house I own, I said, while they were making money off said house, while I was overseas serving my country. Yeah, Rick, I'm sure. Hit them hard. Make it clear this isn't a negotiation. Who should I have signed the letter? Rick asked, and I could hear him already typing. Me, I said. Logan Hayes, Major, United States Army, retired. Let them see my name on that letter. Let them know exactly who's doing this to them and why. No hiding behind lawyers or legalese. This is personal, and I want them to know it. We spent the next hour on the phone, Rick reading me drafts, me suggesting changes, both of us probably enjoying this process way more than was professionally appropriate. The final letter was a thing of beauty, cold, professional, legally bulletproof, and absolutely devastating. It informed Gerald and Marion that I was exercising my rights as majority owner to terminate all unauthorized sublease arrangements. It gave the current tenants 7 days to vacate. It informed them that the property was under new management, mine, and that any further rental activity would be considered illegal and subject to legal action, including potential criminal charges for operating an unlicensed boarding house. And then, because Rick was an evil genius and I loved him for it, we added a final paragraph that made my heart sing. Please be advised that the property owner reserves the right to pursue legal action to recover all rental income collected from the property without the consent of the majority owner, including but not limited to the past 3 years of documented illegal sublease arrangements. Additionally, the property owner may report this illegal rental operation to the appropriate local, state, and federal authorities, including the IRS, for unreported income. That last part, I said after Rick read it to me. That's the kill shot, isn't it? That's the nuclear option, Rick confirmed. It's us saying, we could not only take the house, we could also get you in serious trouble with the tax authorities and local government. Most people would rather negotiate when they're staring down that barrel. Good, I said. Let them negotiate. Let them scramble. Let them feel what it's like to have the rug pulled out from under them by someone they underestimated. We sent the letter that same day. Certified mail, return receipt requested, because at this point certified mail was basically my signature move. I paid extra for overnight delivery because I wanted them to get it fast, wanted them to choke on their morning coffee the way I'd choked on mine when I got Clara's text. That night, I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I slept like a baby. Not because I was being cruel or vindictive, but because for the first time in 9 years, I felt like I had control over my own life. The Hayes family had spent nearly a decade treating me like I was disposable, like I was a tool they could use when convenient and discard when I became inconvenient. They'd taken advantage of my service, my absence, my good nature, and my desperate need to be accepted by them. But the tool had just grown teeth. And Gerald Hayes was about to find out. that sometimes the person you underestimate is the one who ends up owning everything you thought was yours. I raised a glass of bourbon to the universe, to karma, to whatever cosmic force had led me to find that co-signed document in my old files, to reading the fine print, I said to my empty apartment, and to never, ever underestimating the poor kid from the wrong side of town. Somewhere across town, in that big fancy house on Auburn Lane, I imagined Gerald opening an envelope with my name on the return address. I imagined his face turning red as he read the contents. I imagined Marion clutching her pearls, real ones this time, probably. I imagined Clara realizing that her attempts at emotional manipulation had accomplished exactly nothing. And I smiled. Not a sad smile. Not even a bitter smile. A genuine, satisfied, Christmas morning smile. Because sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys win. Even if they have to become a little bit ruthless to do it. January 2nd dawned cold and clear, the kind of winter morning where your breath makes little clouds and everything feels crisp and full of possibility. Or in my case, full of legally sanctioned revenge wrapped in a bow made of property rights and justified pettiness. I'd slept great. 9 solid hours of the deep, dreamless sleep that only comes when you know you're about to do something monumentally satisfying and completely within your legal rights. Rick had driven up from Colorado the night before, checking into a hotel near my apartment because he'd said, and I quote, "There's no way in hell I'm missing this. This is better than anything on Netflix." He'd brought Layla with him, who turned out to be this tiny woman in her 40s with kind eyes and the organizational skills of a military general. She'd also brought a 3-ring binder with every piece of documentation we could possibly need, color-coded tabs included, because apparently paralegals don't mess around when it comes to property disputes. We met for breakfast at a diner that served coffee strong enough to strip paint and pancakes that could double as frisbees. Rick was wearing an actual suit, which seemed excessive until he explained that showing up looking professional made everything feel more official and intimidating. Psychological warfare, he'd said, cutting into his eggs. We want them to know this isn't just you being petty. This is you being petty with legal representation. The locksmith arrived at my apartment at 9 a.m. sharp. His name was Dennis. He was probably in his 60s, and he had the weathered look of a man who'd seen some things in his line of work. When I explained the situation, keeping it vague but hitting the highlights about co-signing a mortgage and being told not to come home, his face broke into this huge grin. "Son," Dennis said, loading his tools into his van. "I've been doing this job for 35 years, and this is the best call I've gotten in a decade. I once changed locks for a woman who'd caught her husband cheating. Another time I helped a guy lock out his business partner who'd been embezzling. But this? A military man taking back his own house from in-laws who tried to shut him out? This is poetry." We drove in a convoy, my truck leading, followed by Rick's rental car with Layla riding shotgun surrounded by her documentation, and Dennis bringing up the rear in his locksmith van. I felt like we were going to war, except instead of guns we had legal documents, and instead of enemies we had my confused, panicking in-laws who were about to have the worst day of their lives. The house at 45, Auburn Lane looked exactly like I remembered it. A big, beautiful 2-story colonial with a perfectly manicured lawn that I'd mowed approximately 800 times, a 3-car garage that Gerald had never let me park in, and a front door that I'd walked through countless times feeling like an outsider in what was technically my own property. Today, that was going to change. I pulled into the driveway, all the way up, right in front of the garage, blocking it completely because I was feeling petty and I'd earned it. Rick parked on the street, and Dennis pulled in behind me, his van advertising Dennis's lock and key service. 24/7 emergency services in big cheerful letters that seemed almost comically inappropriate for what we were about to do. Before we'd even made it to the front door, it swung open. Gerald stood there in khakis and a polo shirt, collar popped, naturally, his face already red and furious. Behind him, I could see Marion hovering, looking like she was about to faint, and Clara standing at the bottom of the stairs in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her face puffy like she'd been crying. Eli was there too, leaning against the wall with his phone in his hand, probably live tweeting his family's destruction or whatever useless thing he did with his time. "What the hell is this, Logan?" Gerald bellowed, stepping out onto the porch like he was king of the castle. "Some kind of power trip? You think you can just show up here with your lawyer and he gestured at Dennis. your locksmith, and intimidate us? Good morning to you too, Gerald, I said pleasantly, climbing the steps with Rick and Layla flanking me like the world's most professional entourage. And to answer your question, no, this isn't a power trip. This is a property management transfer. Perfectly legal, all above board. Exactly what any responsible majority owner would do when they discover their property has been mismanaged. Mismanaged? Marion squeaked from the doorway, her hand flying to her chest. We've maintained this house perfectly. We've taken excellent care of it. Oh, is that what we're calling running an illegal boarding house now? Rick interjected smoothly, pulling a document from his briefcase. Maintaining it perfectly? Because I have statements from 3 neighbors, county records showing utility usage consistent with more than 2 residents, and photographic evidence of multiple people living here who aren't family members. Would you like to revise your statement about excellent care, Mrs. Hayes? Marion's face went white. Gerald's went redder. Clara made a sound like a wounded animal. Eli, credit where it's due, actually looked up from his phone. We were just helping out some students, Gerald sputtered, but his bluster was fading fast. Giving them a place to stay. It's called being generous, something you wouldn't understand. Generous, I repeated, savoring the word. Is that what we're calling $500 a month per person, cash only, no receipts? Funny, most people call that running a business. And most people running a business get permits, file taxes, and, oh, here's the important part, actually own the property they're doing business with. Which brings me to why I'm here. I pulled out my own copy of the cosign document, the one that had been sitting in my files for 8 years like a time bomb waiting to go off. This is the mortgage cosign agreement from 2016. The one you told me was just a formality, Gerald. Remember that? You said it would help you get better rates. You said you'd refinance and take my name off. You said a lot of things, actually. We were going to, Gerald started. Let me finish. I cut him off, and something in my voice must have warned him not to push it because he actually shut up. According to this document, which has been reviewed by my attorney and verified by the county records office, I own 51% of this property. Controlling interest. That makes me the primary owner, and you and Marion minority stakeholders. That's ridiculous. Eli piped up from his position by the wall. This is our family home. You can't just. Actually, yes he can, Layla said, stepping forward with her binder like a schoolteacher about to drop some knowledge. As majority owner, Mr. Hayes has the legal right to make decisions regarding the property, including but not limited to determining occupancy, setting rental policies, initiating sale proceedings, or requiring minority owners to either buy out his interest or vacate the premises. This is insane, Clara said, her voice breaking. Logan, you can't do this. You can't just take our home. Your home. I looked at her, really looked at her, probably for the first time in years. Clara, you texted me and told me not to come home. To this house. The one I own 51% of. You literally evicted me from my own property via text message. So let's not talk about who's taking what from whom. That was a mistake, she cried, tears streaming down her face. I told you I was sorry. I told you we could work it out. And I told you actions have consequences, I said, turning back to Gerald. Here's how this is going to work. Dennis here is going to change all the locks on this property, front door, back door, garage, everything. As of right now, I am exercising my rights as majority owner to take control of property management. You have 30 days to either 1. Buy out my 51% at fair market value as determined by an independent appraiser. 2. Sell the property and split the proceeds according to our ownership percentages. Or 3. Vacate the premises and allow me to assume full control. You can't do this, Gerald roared, his face now a concerning shade of purple. This is our house. We've lived here for 20 years. You think you can just waltz in here and... Technically, yes, Rick said cheerfully. And if you'd like to challenge this in court, I'd be happy to represent Mr. Hayes. Of course, that would mean putting all of this on the record, including the illegal boarding house, the unreported rental income, the tax evasion, the violations of local housing ordinances. I'm sure that would go great for you. The IRS loves hearing about unreported cash income. Marion actually swayed on her feet. Clara grabbed the doorframe for support. Eli's phone clattered to the floor. Gerald just stood there, opening and closing his mouth like a fish who'd suddenly realized the hook had been set deep. "This is extortion," Gerald finally managed. "No," I said calmly. "This is property law. This is what happens when you treat people like they're disposable and forget to check whether they actually have any power. You spent 8 years treating me like I was beneath you, Gerald. Made me fix your roof, clean your gutters, mow your lawn. Looked at me like I was some charity case who should be grateful you let me marry your daughter. And the whole time, I owned this house more than you did." I walked past him, right through the front door, into the house I'd only ever entered as a guest in someone else's home. It smelled the same. Expensive candles and whatever cleaning products rich people use. The furniture was the same. Probably cost more than most people's cars. The photos on the walls were the same. Family pictures that I was barely in, always on the edge of the frame like an afterthought. "Get out," Gerald growled from behind me. I turned around and smiled at him. "No. See, that's the thing, Gerald. I don't have to get out. This is my house. You get out. You and Marion and your entitled kids, you all get out. You have 30 days to figure out your next move, and until then, you're guests in my home." How does that feel? Being the guest? Being the one who doesn't really belong? Enjoy it. I lived it for 9 years. Dennis was already at work on the front door, drilling out the old lock with the kind of efficiency that suggested he'd done this 1,000 times before. The sound echoed through the house. A mechanical whirring that sounded like the future arriving whether you wanted it or not. "Mr. Hayes," Layla said, handing Gerald a manila folder. "This contains all the relevant documentation, including the notice of property management transfer, the termination of unauthorized subleases, and the timeline for your decision regarding buyout, sale, or vacuation. My contact information is on the business card attached. We'll need your response within 30 days. Gerald took the folder like it was a bomb. Marion was crying now, quiet tears running down her face. Clara was staring at me like she'd never seen me before, like I was some stranger who'd wandered into her life and upended everything. I looked at Eli, still standing there with his mouth hanging open. "Nice mug you had at Christmas," I said, referencing the #1 sun mug I'd seen in one of Clara's Instagram posts. "Bet it's dishwasher safe. You'll probably need to pack it up soon." Then I walked out, Rick and Layla following me, leaving the Hayes family standing in their front hallway, my front hallway, looking like their world had just ended. Which, in a way, it had. As Dennis finished with the front door and moved to the back entrance, I stood in the driveway, looking at the house in the cold January sunlight. Snow was starting to fall, light, gentle flakes that made everything look like a Christmas card. "Guess I'll see you next Christmas," I called back to Gerald, who was still standing on the porch looking shell-shocked. Or not. We drove away in our little convoy, leaving the Hayes family to contemplate their next move. In my rearview mirror, I could see Gerald still standing there, that folder hanging from his hand, watching us leave. "How do you feel?" Rick asked over the phone as we drove. "Like I finally came home," I said. "Just took the scenic route to get here." They left quietly. No dramatic showdown part 2, no lawyers storming in with injunctions, no Gerald standing on the lawn screaming about injustice while the neighbors filmed it for TikTok. Just silence. They packed up their stuff over the next 2 weeks, hired movers who gave me sympathetic looks like they'd seen this movie before, and disappeared into whatever rental property accepts families who've spectacularly screwed themselves over. The morning after they left, I walked into 45 Auburn Lane with my own key. My key, not a copy, not a borrowed one. And stood in the empty living room. It smelled like dust, regret, and whatever cheap perfume Clara had been wearing lately. The walls had weird rectangular shadows where their expensive art had hung. The floors were scratched. The kitchen had a broken tile I'd offered to fix 3 years ago that Gerald had said he'd handle, but never did. I found my old deployment photo buried under a pile of junk mail in the garage. Me in full uniform, younger, stupidly hopeful, smiling like I believed in things. They'd thrown it away. Not donated it. Not packed it. Just tossed it in the trash like I was something to be erased. I didn't cry. Instead, I laughed. One of those long, cleansing laughs that shakes your whole body and makes you feel lighter afterward. Because sometimes you realize that peace doesn't need an audience or validation or anyone's permission. Sometimes peace is just standing in an empty house that's finally, actually yours, holding a photo of who you used to be, and being okay with who you've become. I took off my boots, something I'd never felt comfortable doing here before, sat on the old couch they'd left behind, and said out loud to the empty room, "Congratulations, soldier. You survived both wars, the one overseas and the one at home." Months later, I turned the property into something better, something that actually mattered. Hayes House. I called it, because the irony was too perfect to pass up. A veteran recovery home for guys like me who'd served their country and come back to find that home wasn't quite what they'd left behind. Guys who needed a place to land, to figure things out, to remember they were worth more than how their families or ex-wives or the world had treated them. My buddies helped renovate it. Rick donated legal services. Dennis changed every lock for free. "Best job I ever had," he said. We filled those bedrooms that Gerald had illegally rented out with vets who had nowhere to go for the holidays. Real family. The kind that earns your trust through shared experience, not the kind that demands it because of shared DNA. A local reporter came by once and asked, "Wasn't this your in-laws' home?" "Yeah," I said, hammering a nail into new drywall. "They gifted it to me. Emotionally. And legally. Every Christmas now, I hang one ornament on the tree in the common room. A little metal tag with the word "fine" engraved on it. Some of the guys ask about it. I tell them the story, the whole story, and they laugh because they get it. They understand what it means to be dismissed, underestimated, discarded. That one word started everything. A text message meant to push me away instead pulled back a curtain on who I really was and what I was actually worth. The Hayes family tried to evict me from their lives and accidentally gave me the tools to evict them from mine. Best Christmas present I ever got was realizing I didn't need their version of family. I could build my own. And I did.